So I was really delighted to have the chance to be able to talk about something I really care about. Abandon thought, all ye who enter here, the Canadian so-called education system, and also how that links with what is called Islamization, what's happening with Islam in the schools and in the rest of society. And I'll give you my basic line, and that is, if we had good thinking, there's no way we would have let Islam in. In other words, often a bunch of people are exposed to the same virus. Some of them get a bad cold, some of them get a bit of something, a couple of them almost die, others walk away and they're untouched. What they have is a good immune system. A capacity to think is a human immune system. And what we haven't had in Canada is a decent immune system. So, and I will say it's not even just that. Even that word, Islamization, irritates the hell out of me. It resonates with words like civilization, idealization, integration. What are we doing allowing a word like that? I don't care that they teach Islam in the schools. I care that they have Islam falsification in the schools. In other words, we have to use an accurate word. If we were thinking, what is this Islamification thing? Thought would mean you have to use an accurate word for something. By the way, it doesn't have to be Islam falsification. It could be Islam fictionalization, or it could be Islam disinformation or misinformation. What I mean is all of those words would describe what is happening. Islamification is a way of hiding it. And I will say, look at the power of words that they are taking. Islamophobe. That's the power of words. It's a lying word. It's not a true word, but it's a powerful word. So I don't know who came up with the word Islamification. My guess is it's the same people who came up with the word Islamophobe. Because Islamophobe paints a bad picture of me who's trying to tell the truth. And Islamification just means, well, what are they objecting to? A little bit of Islam in the school? So again, I'm starting with thinking is really important. And so I'm going to go on. And by the way, since about 2005-06, I got hit by the same kind of thing on two areas. By the way, I've taught things like critical thinking and ethics. 2005-06, on two sides, that's when I first began to pay attention to Islam, and that was with that cartoon. And there was a huge amount of fuss. Okay, fine, but then I also was listening to what was happening, like in Baghdad, 10,000 Muslims were murdered by Muslims. I would think if I were a Muslim, I'd be really upset. Even as a non-Muslim, pile up 10,000 bodies. It's quite a lot of dead bodies, okay? Huge. Over here, there's a little cartoon in a rinky-dink country published in an itsy-bitsy magazine. I'm a Muslim, just thinking, what am I going to get upset about? And I thought anyone sane would get upset about 10,000 dead Muslims. But millions are marching against a cartoon and burning down embassies and cars and killing, and I went, this is crazy. Okay, that's on Islam. Other things that were going crazy. Now, this might not bother you, but I was on an airplane, and there's a Canadian singer, Bon Jovi, and he was singing the most imbecilic song in the world. We're all where we are meant to be. Now, that's you're being raped and murdered. You're all where you are meant to be. You're caught in the Holocaust. You're all where you are meant to be. And he was trying to be inclusive. Every race. He had people in wheelchairs, meant to be in wheelchairs, of course. Now, unfortunately, it was a very long song, and by the time it was over, I had drafted the beginning of what ended up being one of my first pieces that went online. Stupid opinion number 1. It was just like, who meant us to be there? Like, if you're meant to be being raped and murdered, somebody must have meant it, because you didn't mean it. So I was getting really irritated at the non-thinking there. And what happened in the same year in my classes, another non-thinking, by the way, this was a revolution because I had taught critical thinking before and ethics before. Now I walked in the class and we're going to evaluate opinions and stuff, and all of a sudden everybody was like, no, all opinions are equal. And I've been teaching, this is the year 2005-06, and I've been teaching since 1990. What's happened? Well, I'll tell you what happened. These were kids who started with maternelle up, and by the time they got to college, where I was teaching, they'd been through it, and all of a sudden I had 40 students against me. Now, this had been creeping in, but it had never swamped my class, but in 2005, so 2006, stupid opinion number 2 was all opinions are equal. How resistant were people to listening to reason? I thought, it's going to be a piece of cake. I'll just mention, I have multi-race. I had 4 black students of the 40, and I had Chinese and Indian, etc. I'll say, I just think slavery is just wonderful. Well, my black students said, well, it's just your opinion. You're totally entitled to it. I went, isn't it the wrong opinion? Isn't there something wrong with it? No. Everyone's entitled to their opinion. Okay. I tried to get it through to them that Hitler probably had a bad opinion of Jews. And that his opinion wasn't here and his actions somewhere else. No, opinions were totally disconnected from action. What? You mean if your opinion is that the NDP is wonderful, you're going to vote for the Conservatives. And if you think the Conservatives are wonderful, you'll vote for the Green Party, of course, because your opinion is totally disconnected from your actions. No. Okay, then they're connected. No, they're not. And by the way, these were nice students, intelligent students, except for this, they were totally blind about this kind of thing. And I'll tell you, the ringleader was the brightest black student, like an A++ student. And so he looked at me before the class was over, that first class, and went, Elsa, I agree with you that slavery is bad, but I know it's just an opinion. Unlike the stupid teacher who thinks that there is something objective about it. Now, what is wrong with this? Well, what's wrong with this, it doesn't entitle you to evaluate anything, good or bad about anything. It doesn't entitle you to evaluate Islam, for example. If they get offended about something, who are you to object? You just are supposed to accept it. So you're totally defenseless. And if you criticize something, you are being that totally horrific thing that nobody has any right to be, judgmental. Now, I was bringing up to my students that I was brought up to have a good head on my shoulders. In other words, judgmental. Well, it's terrible. What they didn't understand is that to say judgmental is bad is making a judgment. And if judgment is wrong, you may not judge that it's wrong because you are being judgmental and you get thrown out of the class. But they didn't understand that. It's just judgmental was bad. You have no weapons. You're vulnerable to anything. So I didn't connect what was happening with Islam and the no thinking taboo, but I did go, this makes you incredibly vulnerable. And as I'm saying, it's not just schools. It was happening in the school system, the media, Bon Jovi the idiot, and I can go through all opinions are equal, you are where you are meant to be. By the way, you're all where you are meant to be. Look left, right. You are meant to be there. All of you. You're not meant to be anywhere else. You're meant to be here. I am meant to be here. What does that mean? There's no free will, by the way. Somebody is meaning us to be everywhere, dragging us through our lives, meaning us to be everywhere. Try getting that but people buy into that. If you think, you ask yourself like I do, what does it mean if we're all where we are meant to be? You have no free will. Oh, she's looking at me. She's meant to be looking at me. Ah, she's laughing. She's meant to be laughing. Does it make any sense that you're all meant to be throughout your lives everywhere? You have no control over anything. You're meant to be fertile. You're meant to be unfertile. You're meant to be run over by a car. You're meant to be brain wrecked. By the way, again, in terms of words, this is an aside. and word control, the word politically correct to me has no emotional resonance. I coined a different word recently, and that was brain wrecked. That to me has emotional resonance. The word, I gave Islamification, has no emotional resonance. Islam fictionalization, falsification has resonance. Brain wreck has resonance. We need to take the words back. There are two big things that I really want to get across, and one is, how do we become active? And there's two directions. One is, this does not apply here in terms of you're getting involved in it, and that is that we have to do class actions. It might be one way for the issue to become visible, that the education system is failing our students. What is it like if you can't think? It's like not having a fire drill, and in fact, students have been taught there should be no fire drill, and even the parents don't think that a fire drill might be a good idea because all opinions are equal, etc. It's soft. And here's the second thing that I think that we really need to do, and that is to form grassroots groups and get into schools. To get thinking in, and by the way I see it is that the core thing is we need to think. And if we're going to think, we think about Islam. So it's just one of the things we have to think about. So, and I would think about having 2 pamphlets to bring to school. I wrote one of them about a week ago, The Quick and Easy Guide to Understanding Islam. What did I do? I've been a teacher for a long time. To be a good teacher, you have to imagine who your student is to reach them. If I go PhD level, at my college students, they're going to go cross-eyed, fall asleep, and unconscious. And when you're teaching college, you get enough unconscious students. You don't have to pitch the wrong thing at them. So what did I do? I tried to imagine there's somebody who's sort of like, what's going on with Islam? And the way I started it is, well, is it a religion of peace or isn't it? Like, we get both things. And especially in school, they're going to get I Love Islam, which is all about religion of peace. So I said, okay, let's put Islam aside, but I'm going to give you the first word, abrogation, but not talking about Islam. How could I talk about it otherwise? I said, okay, let's imagine you've been at a party and you've had a few too many, and you hit the road with your car, and you get stopped. Your alcohol level is 0.40, which is merely 5 times the current legal limit. Well, you say, though, this is ridiculous. This is so silly. So you go to the library, you get some books, and on your court date you go, look at this. 1950, 1955, 1960, 1965, 1970, and 1975. There isn't a law on the books that says that I shouldn't have a 0.40 liquor level. So, case dismissed, I believe. How many of you think the judge would say, oh, you're so right, I forgot the 1950 laws? No, he's going, I agree. What he'd say is, this person's a raving lunatic because we've changed the law. No, not case dismissed. Hand over your license. Okay, another instance. Let's say you're a woman. A lot of you are female here. A lot of you might have voted before. But now you go to the polling station and there's someone older there who remembers way back when and says, no, dearie, you cannot vote. You are a woman. Look, I have the law book. 1901, 1902, 1903, 4, and 5. Don't think of this really old person over 100 years old. You can't vote. It's silly. How many of you who are female would accept that, oh yeah, so sorry, I shouldn't vote? How many of you would ask for, could we get rid of that voting officer? Why? Because the law has been changed. I said, okay, that's abrogation. We say the law has been changed. They say it's been abrogated. So what do you do with Islamic text? Well, obviously you go to the last stuff written. Very obvious. Because then you just see anything else before that is in accord, fine. If it's in discord, that's like no drinking and driving, that's now. Drinking and driving, 1950. Okay. So where do you go? The jiffy shortcut answer I end with is Surah 9:5. Why? It's the last thing he wrote. And it's even called, Muhammad's last will and testament. What does that say? And I start with, slay the infidels wherever you find them. Now, what does that say about Islam being a religion of peace? It kind of says it's been abrogated. And so I explain one thing after another. And then, how come all Muslims don't say that? Well, you must have heard the word taqiyya. And I explain it in the same kind of way. So what I try to do is to take somebody through who's sincerely curious or even hostile, but to present the facts in a kind of way that will reach the person. But how do we get that in? And by that, I think that we need activism. Parents, grandparents, we need people to say, I am going to put some time into this. I'm going to do something about this. Because it's not just going to go from here into the schools. I think it's so useless if we come here and we go, good point she's making. That's right, we need to get thinking in schools. We need to actually get thinking into the schools. And I have in fact coined a name for the group that I hope you all join. And it is called RANT. And my model is a group called MAD. You may have remembered that. Mothers Against Drunk Driving. They're the ones who really drove the setting in alcohol limits. Now, it's not a very friendly name, and I remember at the time going, whoa, I don't want to meet those mothers anywhere. They're mad, and a good thing too. Their kids got killed because of the law. And so you could call that manslaughter. In other words, we were enabling the death of their children by not having laws. So what's RANT? It's Rebels Against No Thinking. And by the way, just being a member of RANT isn't enough. It would be doing something, going to a PTA meeting. And it would mean some activism. And by the way, I have now written one of those 2 pamphlets that I think every ranter should have. And the other one I want is to finish writing is Abandon Thought, All Ye Who Enter Here, which documents how we have an anti-thinking system. And by the way, I would also in this thing show why, so you don't have to know it yourself. By the way, I don't know if you do know how you would show that all opinions are equal is wrong. And I'll give you the answers. There are 2 ways, logic, and then there's facts. And before I even go there, I want to read you some drivel. Here, okay. This is somebody telling you what good thinking is about, and this person was writing in American Thinker, says he was trying to find out what is thinking, and he was saying it's totally dreadful. And I'm going to tell you what the rules are of good thinking, and they're so easy. And this is the best he found. And he starts by writing, no explanation I could find focused on finding the truth, and all agree the purpose of critical thinking is rather for you to decide what to believe or do. This is the clearest explanation he found. First, suspending judgment to check the validity of a proposition or action. Well, that's good. Figure out if it's truthful. Second, taking into consideration multiple perspectives. Is the earth flat or round? We better ask the Flat Earth Society and take into account multiple perspectives and not be judgmental. Then examining implications and consequences of a belief or action. What does it mean if you believe the earth is flat or round? Let's forget about finding out if it is. We've got to figure out, what does it mean? So what does it mean if you're judgmental about a religion? It means something terrible, I am sure. Next, using reason and evidence to resolve disagreements. So we are supposed to end up agreeing as opposed to figuring out what's true, right? Okay. Last, reevaluate a point of view in light of new information. Okay, does that mean using facts? Okay, I'm actually, instead of trying to go further with this, I want to tell you the rules of good thinking. They are so incredibly simple. 1, get facts. Get more facts. Get facts and more facts and stay open to facts. So facts. You know what the detective says? Give me the facts, ma'am, nothing but the facts. That's rule 1 of good thinking. How can I think about something if I don't have facts? Second thing is, I don't care about those other viewpoints, but if there are more facts, bring them in. Like about the earth, bring me more facts. Don't other viewpoints, that flat earth society again. The second thing is use logic. Okay? If you have the category, mammals lactate their young, you find a new animal that's never been seen, it's got its young, and they're sucking away at the teats of the animal. You go, that's a mammal. I don't know what it is. I've never seen it before. It's not a dog or a cat or a cow or a horse, but it's doing the dog, cat, cow, horse thing of sucking at teats. It is a mammal. That's logic. These are so simple. By the way, what this person is doing is mixing ethics in. Once they talk about suspend judgment, that is an ethical position that you should suspend judgment. It has nothing to do about thinking. You're not supposed to mix. I taught ethics, by the way. Ethics is one thing. Thinking is something else. You use thinking tools about ethics, but you don't mix ethics and thinking and have a ethics soup. The whole thing, resolving disagreements, that's an ethical thing that you're supposed to resolve disagreements. Thinking has nothing to do whatsoever with resolving disagreements. You might resolve a disagreement or you might not. Thinking doesn't have anything to do with that. So this stuff, by the way, this is what my students, all my students were relativists. The only thing that wasn't relative is that relativism was the only good ethics, which is a non-relativist thing, and you can't believe that relativism is any better than any other ideology if you're a relativist, because relativism means they're all equal. So universalists are just as good as relativists. Okay, so how would you, if somebody says all opinions are equal, how would you show logically that it doesn't work? One, logically, anything that includes its opposite is wrong. So if I'm alive includes I'm dead, doesn't work, because you can't be alive and dead at the same time. Anything that includes its opposite is wrong. Okay, all opinions are equal means all opinions are in the equal thing. Well, another opinion is all opinions are not equal. That's the opposite opinion. So, if you believe that all opinions are equal, you simultaneously must believe they are not. That's like matter and antimatter colliding. In other words, without looking at a single fact, all opinions are not equal. On the other hand, it's tremendously to the benefit of society that doesn't want you to look at things. And by the way, Islam doesn't want to be looked at. So I don't know who's behind this. It could be Islam, it could be communism, I don't know what. But it's some force that doesn't want us to look at things. What's the other way of showing that all opinions are not equal? Well, it's rule number 1, get some facts. What do you mean by they're all equal? Do you mean they're all equally wordy? Do you mean the same amount of people hold them? Do you mean they're equally valid? What do you mean by all opinions? What's an opinion? What's a belief? You can immediately, they're not equal. Once you ask a question, I'm going to say though, how does anyone hold something this inane? And I will just tell you, you have to go back a long time. It's not just education. It's like cotton wadding. It's like water that the students swim in. Because I asked the students from the beginning, where did you learn that? Did your teachers tell you that? And they went, no, it's obvious. All opinions are equal is obvious. And yes, so they learn this filter. What that means is that you can't ask questions about anything that might be dangerous to you. At the same time, they ardently hold in climate change rigidly. Many of them believe no borders and no one is illegal, but they must believe also that you should have strong borders, right? Because all opinions are equal. But they'll foam at the mouth if you suggest lowering immigration. So that's what I mean, it's totally irrational. They actually haven't thought about it. So we have a totally crazy system. How are we going to stop it is the real question. And that to me is a really, really crucial one. By the way, I do want to say a couple of other crazy things that go in there. let's say at the time of Galileo, some little village is discussing his ideas, and they just heard about this stupid idea. Well, what might they say? Well, one person might say, well, I talked to the village priest, and he says it's heresy. Oh, that's right, out. Somebody else might say, oh no, I did even more. I talked to the village astronomer, and he says it just doesn't make any sense. And the astronomer might have checked with other of his astronomer friends, and they'd all agree it doesn't make any sense. And if there was somebody very educated in the village, they might say, oh, you know what I did? I wrote to my friend at the Sorbonne, and on this piece of parchment, and they came back. And of course, the earth is at the center and is solid. What are they doing? They're doing exactly what people do around Islam. What they're doing is they're relying on experts, right? As opposed to getting facts. How do you actually see what's at the center, the earth or the sun? And now we know, by the way, it's not the sun's also moving, but we're back in 1500. Facts. What Galileo didn't change his mind by talking to an expert. He was the expert. How did he become the expert? The telescope was getting better and stronger. He got more and more information. He went through facts, not through experts. If you went and you checked the facts about Islam, meaning the religious texts, you're going to get to something very different from asking the nice Muslim next door or the imam. In the first place, you also have to take into account taqiyya. But on top of that, even if they're being totally honest with you, they're not the facts. You have to go to the facts. So, and you might put down those villagers, but it's just going around all the way around us. And the not fact changing, I'm going to give you a fanciful example, but this is actually what people do. Let's say you have a bunch of young people sitting around at a coffee shop, and one says, hey, I just got a tweet in, it says elephants fly through their enormous farts. Oh, is that so? Oh no, you know what, I really don't like that, I don't think you should call an elephant's farts enormous. It's very insensitive. I think that you should say species appropriately sized farts. Oh, they say, oh, that's right, but I think it just wouldn't fit in the tweet. And the other one says, yeah, and that word fart, I think, maybe gas would be better, or flatulence. That's when you have sensitivity training instead of fact training. How would you actually do things if you were fact-centered? You might check what are the stats around elephants. Have you found any that have any flights? No. And then, even if they did fly with farts, then you get the evidence. But people so often get so caught up in not hurting someone's feelings that they don't bother with the facts. So anyhow, we have a dangerous education system. It's not just the education system. Why did I pick that instead of the media or stuff? In fact, I think the education system might be easier to take on than the media and politics, etc. Teachers are often actually, speaking as one, very well intentioned. So I'm just thinking it's a more vulnerable place to hit than try to get at CBC and CTV and getting those reporters educated. Are you going to do anything? I don't know. If you are, where could you do it? Where could you join RANT? Well, I have some business cards here which you could have, or if you go online and go to westindanger.com. And that is about it, but I'd love to have questions from you. What do you think of these ideas? What's your experience been?
And here we are. We want to speak the truth, and we could end up with lawfare on us. And but if we had enough money to protect ourselves, and we could be attacked is one thing. I start getting on TV and stuff like that, I'd probably end up in the same position as Tommy Robinson. So how do we spread the truth without being attacked?
I don't think that you can totally not be attacked. And it's, what do you call that, two-edged sword or whatever? On the one hand, if you don't get the word out, you won't get attacked. One of the things that you do try to do is, if you do tell the truth, etc., and you're careful about where the laws are, it's very hard for them to get you. It's much harder. It's also much better if you are either you have a tenured position. If it is a really tough thing, people do have to develop the strength and the courage. For example, if you do have a safe position, that you do speak out, that you're not afraid of criticism. And for many people, they just buckle under. And I'm going to give you another thing that I'm going to say about that. I'm very much for people being strong in themselves, and so many people deal with so much fear. A friend of mine won't go to any of Valerie's events because she's too afraid there's going to be a bomb attack. In other words, she's so afraid. She's also not on your email list because she's afraid that Big Brother is watching and she'll get in trouble. I'm just thinking, this person lives with an incredible fear level. Most of us, it's a lot lower, but I'm thinking about somebody like Valerie. It's a lot of courage that it takes going to that point. And I know I tiptoed into things with Islam. When I wrote my first little piece and I passed it out to students, I was told by several people, including the only colleague that I knew who was on my side, I think it would be better if you did this under some other name. And the first class I handed it out to students, just, on the 10,000 here and whatever there, and I passed it off as somebody else's. And I didn't have it online then. And that was and people were afraid for me, that I might get killed for saying, don't you think we should take care of the 10,000 dead people before we're worrying about a rinky-dink cartoon? So, any further things you want to say, Bill?
Well, there's lots of people here, so
okay.
Yeah.
I was just going to make a comment supporting your view that people can't do critical thinking anymore. I was today at an amnesty demonstration for Raif Badawi, and I was arguing, I guess, with two of the people there separately, and they just absolutely could not distinguish between criticizing Islam and, spreading hatred about Muslims or whatever. They couldn't distinguish criticizing the ideology and attacking human beings. And, they said, well, I'm against oppression everywhere and blah, 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 which is perfectly true. The other thing people can't seem to distinguish is the it's not all Muslims argument, which is true. So if not all Muslims engage in terrorist attacks or cut people's head off and stuff like that, then those other guys, the ideology can't be dangerous, if some people don't do it. But I said, well, you have to look at the text, and some people act on those texts, and that makes it a dangerous ideology, even if not everyone who professes to be a Muslim does it. But I was just appalled, and I run into that all the time, the inability to sort of think clearly on that subject.
I'm totally agreeing with you on that, and I ask, to whose benefit is that, over and over, and it's to Islam's benefit. In other words, a detective story, I used to be a huge reader, but I'm too busy these days detecting to read them, and it was always check who benefits. Agatha Christie, I never followed her clues. You follow her stupid clues. She always heads in the wrong direction. It's that guy. No, that guy doesn't benefit. It's the sister who inherits, who killed her sister. What? Yes. Why? Who benefits? So ask who benefits by the not thinking. That's going to be who's behind it. Will it do any good to say, it really benefits the bad guys, bad Muslims, for you not to be able to see that? I don't know if, like as much as possible, make it true. I know one thing that I try to do, because it's also true, people, if I'm going to say something critical of Islam, I say I've always been for human rights. I grew up for human rights. I grew up in a big human rights family. And I grew up in such a family, in fact, because my parents were children in Hitler's Austria. And after the war, what they found out is 6 million dead Jews. Now, there's several things you can do with that. You can say, it didn't happen. You can say, they deserved it. Or you can be horrified. And so what my parents were, my father especially, because my mother's not so political, but I was like daddy's girl, he was utterly horrified. And so human rights were, in our family, it's like for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, there was always a side order of human rights. So I grew up so human rights, and that's also what got me interested in Islam, because it's not for human rights. It's not for male-female equality. It sure isn't for gay rights. It's got slavery as part of it. You know, so when I back it up with who I am and where I grew up, I find like it's a way of getting people sympathetic. And it also happens to be true. That was my family. And, you know, off at my table, you'll probably also get a side order of human rights.
You suggest going after the teachers and...
Not after, bringing them to us.
Sorry, I shouldn't say that. Yeah, you're right. Trying to get them on side. Mm-hmm. I'm not so sure that they're not, some of them would already be on side, but they don't write the curriculum. And if you look at what's happening in Ontario, the kind of minds that are going into the curriculum, and I can't believe that all the teachers are really on side with that, but yet it's going to happen. So it's really our governments that we're against. Can you elaborate any ideas on any of that? Because I have to say I'm not optimistic.
You know, and I have to say that it doesn't matter what the facts are. I was born optimistic. If you've been born with it, you are damn lucky, because with what we're taking on, it's helpful. I'm just going to say, and it's just like, I just believe we're going to do it. And that's why I keep looking here, looking there. What about this? What about that? I found a lot of teachers very sympathetic. And if not teachers, like my little Understanding Islam thing, if someone becomes a PTA member and gets everybody's email address, they could email all the parents this wonderful little booklet. And they could also email all the teachers at the school, grade 5 or 6 or whenever they teach I Love Islam. And they could say, if you have any questions, please talk to me. I think this is a wonderful book. You can even be very naive. I had no idea what was there until I read this. This is so interesting. And by the way, that could be really true. I do say the truth.
Put that booklet in the hands of children in school. I'm not so sure you wouldn't end up in front of the Human Rights Tribunal.
No, it's not. And I never ever mentioned the word Muslim except in a couple of quotes. It's Islamics. To me, my hope would be that people would, for truth, that they would contribute to defend my defense, because that's what helped with Tommy Robinson. That he wasn't just in the end one person. He had over 1,000 people around the world contributing, from Australia, from Estonia, Sweden and Norway, Australia, of course. Very important.
I've always wondered why we haven't gone after teachers or the school boards or anything with corrupting the morals of minors.
I agree.
Between Islam and the sex education, I've always thought what we should be doing is, as a parent or a grandparent, contacting your child's school and letting the principal and the teachers know that if you teach any of this crap to my child, I'm going to charge you with corrupting the morals of minors. And why hasn't anyone done anything about it?
It's much easier for people to speak than to do, obviously, because I'm sure a lot of parents and grandparents have wanted. And it means knowing a lawyer who can do it. It means having the funds to do it, having the drive to do it. Like, you know, we have several real activists here. Like there's Kim from Language Fairness, and there's Marlene Black from Landowners. There's Valerie from Act for Canada. It takes taking something on. You know, somebody has to take it on. So please. Have you taken something on lately?
Oh yeah.
Yeah?
I wear many hats.
Okay, I don't know what your hats are.
Language, landowners, and much more.
Okay, great, fabulous. I love activists.
Now, when you talk about going to the teachers, like I know a young teacher, well I know 2 young teachers. The one's in her mid-40s and she knows what's going on. But she says to me, she says, I try not to teach it. I try to teach other things. But she says, if I go against the curriculum, I'll get fired. That's the, people have jobs and
How
lose.
would your morals go?
Well, the thing is, what do you do? How do you answer that? Because everybody has a mortgage,
Mm-hmm.
Is this teaching about Islam or is this teaching?
No, it's the sex ed
Okay.
and the, what's that, new math, there's discovery
Discovery.
math.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, did you hear? There's a brand new course out. It's called Math with Numbers. But your question, what does one do? Well, could there be some way of getting something to a student as alternate, or like having reading lists? These are alternate sources where the booklet is on there as an alternate source or an alternate viewpoint. Aren't you supposed to expose students to alternate viewpoints? I don't know what you can and can't do. I know that many people are fragile. That's why it's easier for somebody outside the system, like a parent, to email it to all the other parents. At a PTA, like if at a PTA, everyone always distributes email lists and stuff. If all the parents get it, and being invulnerable is a very important thing. There are a lot of people who are at a vulnerable position. That's why I know a lot of people write under a name which isn't theirs, because they're afraid. And I know somebody who was doing stuff for years, very just human rights oriented. He was outed, got fired.
And who wants to go through years of stress going through the court system, which is not really a justice system, it's a legal system.
Mm-hmm.
And you have a 50-50 chance of winning your case, even if you're right.
Somebody has to take things on. I wrote my MA on Nellie McClung, who was one of the people who fought for a long, long time for votes for women. Very unpopular. She was called something terrible, strong-minded. What you want is a weak-minded woman. You go, look at her. She's strong-minded. Oh, no. Oh, I'm immediately going to drop this votes for women nonsense. But she was protected because she was a married woman and her husband had the village pharmacy, apothecary or whatever it was called. So she had, and her mother-in-law was also a votes for women person. In fact, that was who had brought up her husband to be, so he was suitable as a husband for Nellie. So they never had conflict about that. He totally supported her. But anyhow, I wrote it on her, and she spent a long, long time on this, and then she became one of the first female members of Parliament, and the first, and for a long time, only woman on the CBC, etc. So I know that there are people who take things on and do win, and I think it wasn't an accident that I picked a winner. Why would I pick somebody who committed suicide in an attic? I picked somebody I really liked and could, it's not that I've done anything like what she has done, but it's somebody that, like my fantasy could relate to her, saying, yes, I want to do that. And, but I don't know about those teachers. They each have to find their own route.
But the young teachers,
The younger teacher that I know, who's in his 30s, he's already been indoctrinated. Like, I was talking to him about the discovery math at Christmas, and he says, oh no, ma tante, they have to learn their own way.
Hard. By the way, there is a lot of evidence that his way is not effective. So they did a study in Newfoundland, and every year for about 10 years the math scores went down. And that's as kids went grade 1 to grade 10 and got the new incompetent math without numbers. And that's why they're going back to math with numbers. That's all I could suggest for him is get him evidence, get him facts.
Well, the evidence now is that the Minister of Education has thrown another millions of dollars to send the teachers on courses on how to teach this discovery math. And math now is going to be up to 40 minutes a day. So they're taking away 20 minutes or something away from something else. So, and it's the most confusing math, and it doesn't work, and I agree with you, it doesn't work, but they're already indoctrinated. So I don't know how we could get through teachers that are already indoctrinated. And the older ones that know what's going on, they don't want to lose their job. They want their pension. So I'm not sure how we can go about this. I really...
What about that idea of a class action suit?
I think that there is a huge thing in this.
Actually, it just occurred to me, you talked about receiving all of these completely indoctrinated kids. Now, this is quite a long time ago. It's probably a lot worse today.
Yeah, it is.
But how many of them actually managed to learn how to think?
Was the first class 0, because I was like, and like they fought tooth and nail. And by the way, if you think that students are saying this because they're afraid, no, they weren't. They were 40-1 against me, the teacher. The only time that I really got through to somebody is when I had a student break down in that first class, sobbing and weeping, that I was asking her to be judgmental. And it was like the worst evil in the world. But did I learn? Yes. In fact, I'm going to give you my technique, and it worked brilliantly, really brilliantly.
So you mean you're not beyond repair?
No. I'm going to give you my technique, in fact. Okay, this is the first class, and all of you believe that all opinions are equal and stuff. I'm not going to mention that. I'm going to totally ignore that. Though it's an ethics class, I will not mention right or wrong. I am not going to mention that you have been indoctrinated into relativism. Forget relativism. What will I do instead? I will say, I'm sure there are some things that upset you and you think are really wrong. What kinds of things really concern you? And the other side of students, the human, unindoctrinated side, came out. There was this genocide in Rwanda. They saw this video on it. They saw it and they just they had nightmares. Genocide, bad. See what I'm doing? They're not all equal. Genocide. Has anything else ever upset anybody? That honor killing in Ottawa. It was just, honor killing, bad. Anything else has upset any of you? So I would do what kinds of things upset you? What kinds of things, etc. I have the blackboard full of the things. Do you think these things are bad, or do you think that, you could justify genocide? No. Oh, you can't justify genocide. It works like a charm. I don't mention what they believe at all. But go to that. I have their ideas of right and wrong established. Maybe in the third class, and let's say the way my ethics classes would work, we'd have intro, then 13 issues with 13 approaches, and then bringing it together. I haven't mentioned what their opinions are. In the third class, when it's really, they're talking about right and wrong and issues and da-da-da, I mentioned that there are some people in the society that really have the wrong idea about right and wrong. They think all opinions are equal. And by then I've already got them established as that they don't believe that they're all...
Stealth critical thinking.
Stealth critical thinking, yes. Well, actually it was stealth emotion thinking. Because I enlisted not their thinking, I enlisted their heart.
I'm just wondering, when you say that all opinions are equal, where does that come from? Like, is that the same as political correctness?
That is part of political correctness. Political correctness is crazy. First of all opinions are equal, as are all cultures and religions, but the West is wrong.
Yeah.
How can the West be wrong if they're all equal? But all cultures are equal. What it really means is Islam. They're not talking about foot binding. One of the first instances I saw of political correctness in action is I was teaching women's studies long ago. And all of a sudden, Mary Daly, who wrote Gynecology and was looking at different ways that women had been put down around the world, she was attacked. She was writing about women of other cultures, and she shouldn't. But no Indian woman ever said, you shouldn't be writing about sati, it's actually totally fine. No Chinese woman said, that foot binding, it's our right to bind our feet. The only actual objections were coming from Islamic women, or Islam, or Islamic men, right? And it was taken up by Aboriginal rights thing, and there was also about that you can't adopt out, even if there's nobody to even take in a foster child who's Aboriginal. You must not give the child a non-Aboriginal home, and there have been a bunch of cases of that. And my thing in my teaching, my ethics classes, and by the way, students have loved this as an ethical issue. What do children need more? You have a child?
Love.
Yes, and how about good parenting? Okay, exactly. All my students were with me, and they were totally all upset about putting racial rights and cultural rights above human rights. What is a child?
Gender rights too.
What?
Gender rights.
Gender rights too. Yes, a child should know if it's male or female, I think.
No, but parents
Say
of
that
same
anymore.
gender.
I actually, you know what? There's so many single parents and stuff, so I like, so many things have happened
Yeah.
all over the place. I do not believe you need to be brought up by, same-sex parents. What are you going to do? Take sons away from single mothers?
Good point.
No, it's like I believe that you need a loving, caring, supportive home, and there's so many more. And I also know single dads who brought up their kids single-handedly, female kids. I think that having suitable parental love, it doesn't matter if it's male or female. I have a cousin who, when she's less than 30, had 3 kids under 5, and her husband died. What was she supposed to do? Get married fast! Those kids are under 5. No, she was on her own for 15 years.
I'd agree with you, except in the United States now, there's significant evidence that these kids that are being brought up by single mothers, particularly in the inner cities, that's why they have the level of crime that they do.
I think it's also the values. My cousin's 3 children are amazing, wonderful. But what do I think? I think it matters which mother you have, which father you have, what are the values in the culture around. That's what, and by the way, there have been millions of soldiers in World War I and World War II who died. Almost all of them were male. Who brought up the children? Females. I don't believe there was an incredibly high crime rate among the millions of single-mothered children. Yes, I think that the absent father has something to do psychologically.
Well, it's different times now, too.
Yeah.
And of course, they've got all of these government programs to
Welfare
essentially
sort of
make these
encourages.
mothers, it's more profitable to even have another one.
Yeah, no, I'm totally against that, but I'm just saying I don't believe it is the sex of the parents
No.
who raise you.
No.
I'm concerned about the curriculum, and
Mhm.
that's why I was wondering about the class action suit, because a lot of the people have been talking about the difficulty of going to teachers. They don't have a lot of control. They're given the curriculum, they have to teach it. I looked at, I was looking in the curriculum, the Ontario curriculum for grades 9 to 11 to see what they taught about Islam. I wasn't able to find out much. I kind of got the impression that they sent the kids to look on the internet and then report back what they found. I'm not sure. There's a lot of sort of filling in the blanks. You're not sure how they operationalize all this curriculum. But the other thing I saw is, because it was in the area of social sciences, they're teaching them about white privilege, they're teaching them all this stuff.
Safe
They're
space.
teaching them how to be social justice warriors, not just what it means, but you have to think of something you're really upset about and then go out and protest about it. And you know how much thought goes into the protesting the social justice warriors. It's what you were talking about before. They just go out and scream a lot. And I'm just appalled. I mean, I knew they were learning a lot of this stuff in universities, and that was bad enough. But to think that they've already learned this stuff before they even go to university. And how do you stop that? You have to get to the government somehow. You have to get people upset about it. You have to, I don't know, do a film or get W5 to do a documentary
I think it's
on it or
acid.
something.
Hell about
You know what I think
W5.
we should do? When they talk about cultural appropriation, when white people use whatever we should say, well, if we're going to be that way, then whenever people who aren't of European background use cell phones or computers, or vaccines. These were developed in Western countries, so it's cultural appropriation, isn't it?
It is,
When they do
it's the majority culture which they claim are this.
But why do
It's okay for minorities to culturally appropriate our stuff because we are in a position of power. It's divided
Yes.
into a dynamics of power.
Oh,
And
okay.
since we are in power, it's okay to use our stuff. But because we are in power and we have gotten there unjustly and exploited them along the way, it is immoral for us to appropriate theirs.
You better get it. And she's like a great social justice warrior.
Well, I had a bit of a, epiphany on the logic one time, because years and years ago, there was a woman called Fran Hoskin who was opposed to female genital mutilation, and she wrote
One of the very
pamphlets about
early
it.
ones.
And she got attacked, for being, meddling in the affairs of Africans and this and that. And then one time I was attending, and this was in the 90s, I think, a meeting of the National Action Committee for Women, just to sort of see what they were up to. And there was a woman of color who got up, and she was upset because nobody had talked about female genital mutilation. So that was an example of, racism, because nobody was dealing with it. So it's like you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't.
Absolutely. Yes, you can't. It's the no-win thing. Because if they had brought it up, it would have been,
Yeah.
what are you doing?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But what about the curriculums? How can we affect the curriculum?
I don't know all, but what I'm going to do is please join